Princeton University's Keller Center, educating leaders for a technology-driven society.
Thanks for welcoming me back. It's actually been 7 years since I stepped foot on the Princeton campus, or 6.5. I actually dropped out of my PhD, so I'm glad that you guys invited me back and that you weren't too offended that I did that. In retrospect, it was probably the best move I ever made, so for those of you who are considering dropping out of Princeton. As the title says, Mint.com was a $170 million idea. I came up with the idea in late 2005, started the company in March of 2006. We launched in September 2007, 2 years after our launch to the date. We were bought by Intuit, who makes Quicken, QuickBooks, and TurboTax for $170 million. So it was really the idea to that exit in about 3 years' time. I see Taylor back there. His father's a venture capitalist and actually led our A round of investment in Shasta Ventures. So very much thanks to them as well. For those of you who don't know what Mint is, just a little background on who I am and what Mint is before we get into how you go about starting a company, how you go about validating an idea, and then creating a company around it. Mint is the #1 personal finance web application, so it links to 16,000 different banks, brokerages, student loans, credit cards, mortgages, everything. Pulls it all together, gives you bill reminders, low balance alerts, lets you set budgets, and then it's actually a free product. One of the big innovations that we made beyond just the technical innovation of being able to connect up to all those places and categorize your transactions was we make our money if we can help our users save money. So we'll say, hey, you've got $20,000 lying around in a Bank of America account. It's not earning enough interest. You could make $200 more each year if you switch banks. You have 4 student loans from each of your 4 years at Princeton. You should consolidate them at a lower rate. You'd save $300 a month doing that. So it's the algorithms and the intelligence and the computer science that calculates across all people, all interest rates, all balances, what the optimum is for you personally. We've won pretty much every personal finance award out there, from CNN Money and Kiplinger's and CNBC, New York Times top 50 website for the past 3 years straight. And we're the #1 non-bank personal finance application on both iPhone and Android. We're beaten out by Chase, American Express, Bank of America, but we're number 5 or 6 in the category, and the only one who's not a $100 billion bank. So that's what Mint is. A little bit about me. So I started out as an engineer. 4 years ago, even 6 years ago, when I was at Princeton, never would have imagined that I would speak in front of a public audience. The thought probably would have petrified me. I was an engineer, very much introverted. I started out life trying to sell my designs for Legos and Constructs back to those companies. Went to Duke, which looks an awful lot like Princeton, so I liked the Gothic architecture, stuck with it. I think Duke is actually a copy of Princeton, but Princeton's probably a copy of Cambridge. So came here to do a PhD, dropped out of my PhD with a master's. Has anyone taken Ed Zhao's high-tech entrepreneurship class? Anyone? Show of hands? Okay, a few people in the audience. That was actually probably the most influential class that I took here at Princeton. The final exam that we had to do was actually to go off and interview entrepreneurs to understand what it took for them to do what they did. And what I realized, you only had to do one company, is if you're a Princeton student, you can actually talk to just about anybody in the world. You can say, hey, I'm a Princeton student, or Harvard, Yale, Stanford probably work too. I think your company is the greatest thing. Do you have half an hour? I got about 80% yeses from that. And so instead of talking to just one company, I talked to 6. And what I discovered is that all these people that I really admired who had started companies, most of them didn't have PhDs. And the research track didn't seem to be helping me in getting technical innovations out to as many people as possible. I didn't want to invent something for 3 people. I wanted to invent something for 3 million people. And so I left with a master's and then worked on the PlayStation 3 chip. So before I started Mint, and a lot of people think that they look at entrepreneurs who have made it, who have made millions of dollars, who've created a great brand, and they think those guys just knew what they wanted. They went out. I'm sure they never failed. They just went out and did it. And there's sort of this lore in the industry that, of course, I knew I was going to make it. It's sort of this self-confidence or this arrogance. I had no idea that I was going to make it, and in fact, I failed 3 times before I even started on Mint. So the first thing that I ever tried was web development back in '97. That's how I put myself through college. And then I tried an online marketing company, and these paid the bills, but what I found is that service companies don't scale. Service companies where you have to do spin up a project for each different client. So consulting is a service company, law firms, a service company. There's a lot of IT that is very service oriented. Services typically don't scale. And so then I thought, all right, I'll try a product company. And is there anybody who I went to Princeton with, any graduate students here? I don't know if Sharad remembers this. I actually was trying to start a company while I was at Princeton, while I was a graduate student, on a DNA sequence matching processor. It was this special purpose microprocessor that would take strands of DNA and match them and find sequence similarities. What I discovered, I got 3rd place in the Princeton Business Planning competition, is that I don't know enough about DNA sequence matching, really at all, and that it's a niche market. At best, you could have 100 or 1,000 different academic clients throughout the world for this special purpose hardware. And I also tried it while I was in school. So I couldn't give it 100%. I could give it maybe 10% of my time, 20% of my time, and that wasn't enough. So this one I consider to be a total faceplant, just a total disaster. I got rejected by just about every vendor that I went out, just about every sale that I tried to make, and it really went nowhere. So when I started Mint, I took a very different approach, and it's a little, this is sort of the methodology that I formed. Number one is to validate your idea. I actually didn't write a line of code until I'd done about 3 or 4 months worth of thinking on Mint, which I think is counter to what a lot of people will suggest. A lot of people will say, just get the product out there, just iterate very, very quickly, just make a prototype. And that works for certain types of things. I think anything that's social networks, that works. But for finance, I wanted it to be a little bit more rigorous, and there were a lot of technical problems to solve, connectivity to all the banks, and the business model. The next thing was to create a prototype, then to build the right team, and then to raise funding. So how many of you are interested in starting your own tech company? We get like half the room, that's fantastic. At some point, how many of you have actually tried to start a company at this point? A couple professors over there, excellent. By the way, I think that anybody who's a professor trying to start a company should probably take a leave of absence. I'm pretty sure that being a Princeton dropout and suggesting that students drop out and suggesting that professors take a leave of absence to start companies will ensure that I'm not invited back ever again. Maybe that's my game plan. So the first part of becoming Mint, the original idea for Mint was not personal finance at all. I had this, this weird idea that I should create goal-setting software. So I thought that everything in the world could be quantified in terms of time and money. Okay, the Princeton degree is going to cost me this much and it's going to take 4 years. Then, an MBA is going to cost this much and take 2 years. I want a house that's going to cost this much. I want it then. I want to retire with this amount of money. I want to learn Spanish. It's going to take this. And so it was all about subtasks and how much time it's going to take or how much money it's going to take. And I did what is, I think, a little bit uncommon for entrepreneurs. I actually told everybody about the idea. A lot of entrepreneurs or people who have business ideas, they keep them inside. They're afraid somebody is going to, quote, steal their idea. How many of you are afraid that people are going to steal your awesome idea? Yes? Yes? It's very common. Ideas are really nothing. It's all in the execution of that idea. Either you have a fantastic idea and you're one of the only people in the world who can do it, or you have a fantastic idea and you have to be the best executor on that idea. So instead of keeping it inside, instead of being afraid that people would steal my idea, I told everybody. I talked to about 80 different people about this idea, and only one person said they would use it. And that's learning. Because at this point, I hadn't spent a year building it. I hadn't asked my friends and family for money. I hadn't mortgaged my house to invest in this company. It was just an idea, just a concept. But within there, within this initial idea, there was a little gem, a little nugget, which was the money component of the life planning software, of the goal planning software. It resonated. People were having trouble figuring out, well, how much do I need for retirement? How much is something going to cost? How do I save up more? And I realized that virtually everybody I talked to had this problem, and virtually everybody that I talked to hated Quicken and Microsoft Money, the dominant products at the time. Ironically, I now run Quicken. They put me in charge of it. They told me that I was shit-talking it for too many years, and that if I had a problem with it, I had to solve it. So part of getting all of this money for the acquisition was they said, okay, you have to clean up Quicken, which we've done. It's not mint yet, but it's pretty awesome. So the next step in figuring out whether you've got a real business is, first and foremost, you shouldn't start a business because you want to start a business. You shouldn't start a business because, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I know a lot of people in Silicon Valley who just want that label, who want I want to be the entrepreneur. I want to get whatever glory or recognition you get from that. By the way, being an entrepreneur is a tough lifestyle. 9 out of 10 of us, go broke doing this. And like I said, I had 3 failures before success. So you should start a business because it creates value in the world, because it makes life better or easier, it makes things faster. And so what Mint solves is personal finances are complex. The average American has 11 different financial relationships. Simply pulling it all together to see how much you have and how much you owe and where you're spending is a difficult problem and something that everybody needs to do. Everybody has difficulty figuring out what mortgage to get, figuring out what interest rates mean. What's the difference between APR and APY? Am I spending too much or more than average on my gym membership or my mobile phone plan? And it's the kind of problem that finances have been complicated for 50 years or 100 years, and it's not going away. It's not something that's miraculously going to be solved in 5 years or 10 years. So this is a business or a problem that has legs. So if you can address it, you've got a long-term business. It was also a problem that affected a lot of people. Virtually every adult, not only in the US, but worldwide, needs to manage their finances. There are about 500 million people who use online banking, who basically just get a balance and a bunch of garbage-looking transactions, and that's all they have to manage their financial lives. Most people simply have a number in their head like, okay, I'm not broke today, I guess I have some money, that's my financial management plan. That's not a plan. You can do better, and you can do it in a way that only takes 10 minutes to get up and running, and that was the idea behind Mint. Make it dead simple to get your finances in order and to feel in control of your life. The sustainable advantage is it's really hard to connect up to 16,000 different banks. It's really hard to categorize transactions because all you get is a bunch of garbage-looking text. You guys have seen this before where it says, instead of Amazon, point of sale purchase, debit cards, star, AMZ, XYZ, in a bunch of crap in there. As a human, you often have trouble reading it, but as a machine, it becomes even more difficult to understand what that meant. What you don't want to be, and this will be a little bit controversial, probably not the first one. The first one's the slanket. It's basically a blanket with arms. Does it solve a real problem? A blanket with arms. Does it have a sustainable competitive advantage? No, anybody can make these things. In fact, there are 20 knockoffs right now. At best, you could make $10, $50 million in revenue from this, and then it goes away. It's not a business that's going to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The other one that's more controversial, this is Foursquare. Foursquare is very popular right now. It's all about checking in and places and locations and the social experience of where all of your friends are checking in or being the, I don't know, the king or the mayor of Frist or the athletic center, right? Who uses Foursquare here? Foursquare will, Taylor's thinking, shit, Shasta invested in Gowalla. That's about the same thing. These guys will be dominated by Facebook Places because essentially they are a feature on what should be a larger service, which is, yes, places matter. This does solve a real problem in knowing where your friends are or knowing what's popular among your friends. But they don't have a sustainable advantage because the social experience in the place where all of your friends are anyway is, at this point, Facebook. And so these guys, I think, will either be bought out or go away quickly. A lot of the businesses that I see, particularly in the software space, ultimately come down to features that should be in another piece of software. Oh, Twitter doesn't manage groups very well. I'm going to create a startup to do that. Twitter doesn't shorten URLs, so you see 30 URL shorteners. Those are not good businesses. You should not do that. You're not really adding real value to the world. You need to do something unique. You need to do something that changes people's lives in a measurable way. That's a business. A business is creating value. So you have an idea, it solves a real problem, it's in a big market, it applies to a lot of people, you may have a sustainable advantage. What do you do next? The story behind how Mint came to be, it's a little bit bizarre on the first problem that we solved. So I was using Quicken one day. I'd been using it since I was 15 years old. I was commingling my personal and my business finances from these companies that I had started when I was 16, 17 years old doing web development. And I got really busy at this other startup doing CAD tools. I was working 100 hours a week, and for 4 or 5 months, I didn't manage my finances at all. So I get into Quicken, it downloads like 500 different transactions because it was only updating when I'd open the program because it was desktop based. And they were all uncategorized, and it really irritated me. All I really wanted to know about my finances was I going out too much with my friends? Was I spending too much on DVDs? Was I spending too much on electronics? I just wanted a nice pie chart of my spending, and it was like 90% uncategorized. It was terrible. And I thought, why can't they figure out how to categorize transactions? And so when I looked at the structure of all the transactions, I realized, oh, well, actually, it's pretty hard. There's a bunch of garbage in there. But the transactions, if you cut out as much of the garbage and the numbers in there, what you're left with is often a merchant name or an address, sometimes a city, sometimes a state. And so I thought, okay, well, can I develop an algorithm that can categorize transactions more accurately? Quicken, Microsoft Money, they were doing maybe 40 to 50% of transactions, which meant that out of 500 transactions, you still had to manually categorize 250 of them. Way too much work for the average person. It would take you an hour every Sunday just to manage your finances. Managing finances is a hassle. I mean, the reason why Mint is successful is because it makes a painful process as the least painful that it can be. It makes personal finance almost fun. I don't think it can ever be, truly fun. Maybe I'll learn to eat those words. So what I did was I used all of the actually algorithms that I got here at Princeton in Professor Malik's classes. Similar to binary decision diagrams, which we learn about in CAD tools, I developed some search algorithms and some tree pairing algorithms. I actually used a lot of what I learned in Sedgwick and Tarjan's class on ternary search tries. And I took all of these garbage transactions and I tried to scan backwards for a city and a state. And then with whatever tokens were remaining, I would put them into a search engine that I wrote, a ternary search try, and I let it do fuzzy matching, matching where things could be misspelled slightly. They could be truncated, and you would just do the prefix matching. So there was a bit of wild carding in there. And then I would take all the results and I implemented a fast set intersection algorithm. And what the end result was it gave me sort of a probability of match. It would take all this garbage and try to match it to the US Yellow Pages. So I imported a giant database of 20 million US merchants to match against. And that's how Mint categorizes transactions. And all of a sudden you go up from 40 or 50% accurate to 90% overnight. And so, okay, great. You can categorize transactions. I was pleased with myself, but I thought this is just a feature. It's not a business. At that point, it's just a feature. How could I possibly, I was 25 at the time, how could I possibly compete with Microsoft? I mean, they're Microsoft. They have 40,000 people working for them. They had a $200 billion market cap. How can I compete with Intuit and 8,000 people and Quicken, which has been dominant in the market for 25 years? Well, there's no way that I can sell a product and just have on the back of the box that it categorizes transactions more accurately. That's not enough. So I said, all right, well, if you can categorize transactions accurately, that's great because the user knows where their money is going. But that means that we know where their money is going. So if you put it online and you give it away for free, you can make money by saying, hey, you spend $180 on phone, TV, and internet. We see that because we can accurately categorize your transactions. We know that Comcast is cable or internet. You could get a bundle for $99, and that would save you $1,200 a year. And they would pay us for that. They would pay us for a sales fee, for a lead. And so all of a sudden, from solving this one moderately hard problem, we had our business model. Mint would be free. Free is a better price point than paying $80 for the software. It's online, so you can use it at work, at home, on the go. So it has those advantages. And we can make money off of a free product, because otherwise you're a charity if you don't have that business model. Not only that, but instead of just blanketing things with advertisements and banner ads, which get really annoying, and you always have that constant struggle of how much am I going to destroy the user experience versus have advertising, these are things that help people. You know, the only ads that you would see on Mint would be ones that saved you $50 or $100 or $500. And so all of a sudden we had our competitive advantage and our positioning from a marketing standpoint. And so I started to code the algorithm, and then while I was doing this, before I had launched anything, I actually went out with 3 pieces of paper, just a single page each, with what are called concept statements. Now, I'm an engineer by training. I didn't know anything about marketing. And so one concept statement was, Mint is your money ninja. Okay, well, who does that appeal to? Is that the right positioning? Mint is your money champion. Mint is free, easy personal finance. And what are the bullets under there? And then I'd ask, I actually took these out to people waiting at the train station. Because if you ask just your friends, you're going to get a very skewed set of results. If you go to the train station, you can find like actual normal people, and they all have time on their hands. They're waiting for the train. Hey, I know you're waiting for the train. You don't know me, but I'm starting a company, and I could really use, just some honest feedback. Would you, read this? It's one page, and just tell me what you think. Okay, does this sound like something you would use? And people will always say yes more often than they actually do it. You have to gauge their enthusiasm. Does this sound like something that's secure? Because we were really concerned about security. I talked to 50 venture capitalists who said no before I got my first yes on Mint. They all said no one will ever trust a startup with their financial information. But I had gone around and asked people if the statements that I was making, not would you give me your username and password, but does this seem like a trustworthy service? Bank level data security. Okay, that was a key phrase. Once we put in that, then more and more people said, yeah, this sounds like something I would use. Before that, no. So before we had built a website, done our graphic design, done the things that cost a ton of money, simple testing. Testing that you can do on campus, testing that you can do down at the train station. This is how you validate your ideas. This is how you put together an initial marketing, positioning, messaging plan. If you're an engineer, it's like A/B testing. It's quantitative, it's rigorous, it really fits with my engineering brain. It's not this fluffy marketing, branding bullshit that you hear about. I have an inherent distrust of marketing people. So, I have the idea, I have the concept for the business model, and the next step was quitting my job. This is actually harder than you think. And I'm a person who, I felt like I was self-confident at the time, but I had a job, it was well-paying, I probably made $75,000, $80,000 a year working on CAD tools. I was essentially an architect at age 23, 24. I had gotten to start the San Jose division of this company. And then you think, okay, well, should I give all of this up to pursue a dream? And there's a bit of hesitance. You see all of your friends or your Princeton buddies, and they've made solid career progress. They're research fellows, or they're on the track to be a vice president at IBM or whatever it may be. And you quit your job and you see your net worth drain every day. And you're taking on Microsoft and you're taking on Intuit, or maybe you're taking on Google and Apple or whatever it may be. It's daunting. I spent 7 months alone in a room working about 14 hours a day to develop the first version of Mint. I had just moved out to California, didn't really know anybody out there, didn't have any co-founders or anybody to work with. And it's isolating. There are days when you feel like giving up. There are days when, who am I to do this? If this was a good idea, somebody else would have done it. You say that to yourself a lot. If this was a good idea, somebody else would have done it. And yet it's not out there. You don't know about it. Other people aren't using it. So somebody has to do it. And then the next day you'll think, this is the greatest idea ever. I'm going to make so much money off of this. It's going to help save people billions of dollars. I'm going to change the national savings rate with this tool. And the next day you're like, what are you smoking? That's not, you're not going to change the national savings rate. That's ridiculous. You're one guy alone in a room. Whenever I felt like that, I'd listen to Frank Sinatra's That's Life. Fantastic song about getting knocked down to the ground, falling flat on your face. I'd listen to that whenever I get rejected by VCs, and you just push through it and know that the best of the best have doubts, and it's natural when you're doing something that's risky and something that's worthwhile. So, after 7 months alone in a room, I created this. This was the first version of Mint. I can pick apart 100 problems that this page has, but it doesn't look terrible, and it was something that was real. And so when you talk to people, whether it's trying to get a co-founder or your first employees, whether it's trying to raise venture capital, it's not just a PowerPoint, it's not just an idea. You've shown that you've committed to it and you've built something real. It should be usable, it doesn't need to be polished, it doesn't need to be scalable to 1 million people. It just has to give people the idea that there's something real that they can click on it. And so after getting 50 no's by venture capitalists, no one will ever trust a startup with their financial information, I did my 30-second elevator pitch to a guy named Josh Koppelman, He's actually a venture capitalist in Philadelphia, first round capital. Probably one of the closest and best VCs for the Princeton area. And he said, that sounds like a great idea. And so I said, wait, I've got a laptop running in the trunk of my car with a database server, a web server, always be prepared, the Boy Scout motto. I brought it back, gave him a demo. He could click around on stuff. It didn't connect up to all the banks. I just stubbed that out with a fake XML interface. Yeah, that's right, I'll drop XML in a talk. It's techie, but like I said, I'm a little geeky. And he said, this looks great, send me your business plan. A week and a half later, I had a term sheet valuing the company at $3 million to raise $750,000. And this was, I had just hired a friend to be the first employee, but it was basically 2 guys and a contractor working out of my apartment. And we got a $3 million valuation because we had a real prototype. So this goes to how do you build the right team? In Silicon Valley, there's an unwritten rule. How do you value a company that hasn't launched a product yet, that doesn't have any user traction, that doesn't have any revenue, of course, because they haven't launched their product yet. And the rule of thumb is you add $500,000 for every engineer, and you subtract $250,000 for every business guy. Who in here is an engineer by training? You are the most valuable resource there is. You're people who actually build things and actually create things. The marketing guys just spin it. The business guys may do the deals. And by the way, you need them. You need them to get deals done. But you're the real creators of this technology. And you add the real value to the company. So don't get pushed around by the business guys. This guy looks slick. He's well dressed. He's the the econ major who's going to get a job with McKinsey or Bain or Boston Consulting Group. He talks about the Federal Reserve and stocks, and so what? Those guys are a dime a dozen. Every week I reject 1 or 2 Harvard or Stanford MBAs who wants a position at Mint. They're always like, wow, I could do product, I could do marketing, I could do biz dev. Each one of those is their own discipline. If you think you can do all 3, you're not for me. Engineers, finding the right engineer, it's the hardest thing in the world and the most valuable. Because the difference between a good engineer and a great engineer is 10x in the way they can implement algorithms, in the way that they can code efficiently. All the difference in the world. So the first team that I built, I was an engineer. I did the coding myself. I also did the fundraising, so I guess I was the business side of that. Second person I hired, engineer. Third person I hired, engineer. Fourth person I hired was my VP of engineering. Fifth person I hired was a graphic designer who also did HTML, CSS, and had a computer science background. Sixth person I hired was in marketing. So you've got a prototype, you've got a killer idea, you've got the start of a team, you've got your college buddies together, your engineers, you're cranking. Who are the business guys out there who are feeling kind of depressed that I said that you're not as valuable as engineers? Is anybody brave enough to raise their hand? You guys? Thanks for being brave enough. You cannot outsource this. A lot of business students will come up to me after a talk and they'll say, oh, I've got this killer idea. Can't I just outsource that to India or China? No. Tech companies aren't built that way. Tech companies are called tech companies because they're built on awesome technology. Technology has to serve an end human value. It has to solve a real problem. We went over that, but you can't outsource that stuff. You guys need to make friends with engineers. So every business plan that I have ever seen has this curve in it. It's the hockey stick curve. We're going to make $50 million 4 years out. Do you know how many companies have actually made $50 million 4 years out from the idea? Very few. Very, very few. Even an Intuit or a Facebook or a Google will take 4, 5, 6 years to make it to the $50 or $100 million mark. The best companies. What you need to prove is not, because everybody will look at your projections and that's bullshit. You need to prove that you can make enough per user or per transaction that this is a real business and that it's a big opportunity. So I'll show you the slides that I actually used back in 2006. They're vintage slides. So Mint had a different logo, you can see. This was I actually designed that logo. Mint was a contraction of Money Intelligence. Money Intelligence was the original name of the company. So Quicken, Microsoft Money, they're difficult to use. But 20 million people down at the bottom had bought Quicken and Microsoft Money in the past 4 or 5 years. 65 million people use online banking in the US. Lower My Bills, U-Switch, these were companies that would find you a better mortgage or a better savings account. But you had to go and actively search. What Mint would do is you just have your finances there and Mint proactively tells you what to do, like a financial advisor would. It's like a software financial advisor that says, you're an idiot, you should put together all of your student loans and consolidate them. So big enough market, at least 20 million people who are interested in personal finance, up to 65 million people. Great. How are we going to make money? Okay, for every credit card that we offer to people, hey, you've got a credit card that you're paying 30% interest on, you should get one that gives you 0% for the next 6 months. You're going to save yourself $1,200 that way. We get paid $60. We actually get paid more than this now. And then I thought, oh, how often will people do this? Okay, a new credit card maybe every 2 years, every 3 years. How often would you get a new brokerage account? Probably only once. So if this wasn't rigorous, I did as much research as I could in figuring out how much you get paid for each of these categories. The frequency of switch, that was a swag. How many people would adopt it? Well, I figured, well, virtually everybody has a credit card, but not everybody on the site is going to follow our advice. Only a small fraction are. And then brokerage, only half of people in the sort of 20 to 30 age group that we were targeting invest from what from talking to our friends. So that's going to be half of what credit cards were. It's a lot of assumptions in there, but a few years later, if you look at category by category, some of them are off by a factor of 2. Either way, some we make more money on, some we make less money on, but actually pretty accurate. And so this is the kind of planning. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to go out and commission massive research, but do your homework. And so then we said, 20 million people who buy Quicken, Microsoft Money, we could make one day $30 revenue per user per year. You know, it's $1 billion opportunity, or 600 million to $1 billion opportunity. Then there were other revenue lines, but that's what we took to prove that this was a real business. So with that, I went out and one day, 5 months in, 6 months in, something like that, I said, I'm not going to do any engineering anymore. I'm going to become a business person, and I went to every networking event that I could, every alumni event that I could, every tech talk that I could, things like this. And just to try to meet investors, to try to meet employees, to try to get into the startup world. When I talk to investors, 50 no's and 1 million conversations with the guys on Sand Hill Road. That's where all the venture capitalists are, before I got my first yes. I talked to Sequoia Venture Capital. Sequoia did Google and YouTube and PayPal. And they said, we can't invest in you. You're just a guy with an idea, just one guy in a room. And so you get pretty depressed when that happens, but never give up. Be ready to pitch anywhere. When I got my first yes, it was at a random dinner. I had no idea that this guy was going to be there. And it made all the difference in the world. The last thing that I'll say before I switch it over to a Q&A section is, for any of you who are thinking about starting companies, I think it's the most rewarding thing that you can do personally yourself. So from my own experience, I've done about 500 interviews and talks and been on TV, and I was petrified of doing public speaking, 4 or 5 years ago. And now it's no big thing. I was on CNN this morning. I went in and I thought it was just going to be an interview for a column, and they said, no, you're on TV in 5 minutes. And so the kind of confidence that it gives you to start a company and to get rejected as many times as you do by venture capitalists, it's invaluable. When you get rejected by Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins and the best venture capitalists in the world, not a problem to get shot down in a bar or a nightclub or wherever you may be by a girl. Not a problem. It's no big deal in the relative scheme of things. And to know that you have, if you make it, created 70 jobs now from nothing, to have a tool that's used by 4.5 million people, where we've saved people, literally, it's billions of dollars now that our algorithms have found in savings opportunities. The national savings rate is now positive. I'm not saying I changed it, but it is. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
We have time for questions, and then of course we have an opportunity to speak with Aaron outside in the reception, so we take a few questions here.
Thank you for a great talk, and especially your honesty and irreverence. I'm sure that Princeton will be having you back because you mentioned numerous times how valuable the courses you took here were.
It's true.
2 questions. First was, you came back again and again to the importance of venture capital. Could you have done it without it? Would it be possible to have built up a company to the kind of critical mass you hope, just with, say, you and your 6 guys or gals in your garage, and then waiting until you got later? And the second question was, how hard was it finding people that you trusted? You said your first employee was a friend, the second was a contractor. I mean, one of the big things when you're a small outfit is finding people you can trust.
Sure.
So I know you said don't worry about stealing your idea, but,
Yep.
but if you bring someone else on and you have intimate details of what you're trying to do, and it's in an early stage, it could be just as easily split off and taken by somebody else. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Sure. So the first one is on venture capital. Yeah, I think that for Mint, you needed venture capital because to get connected up to 10,000 banks is an expensive proposition. It requires a lot of technical work. And so I put about $50,000 of my own money in the company to get it up and running for those 7 months, and to hire a couple of people, and I paid them out of my own pocket. Unless you have the kind of business that's going to generate revenue from day one and doesn't require a year or a year and a half of development, you probably need outside investors, at least in a limited way. A lot of people, I think, are skeptical of venture capitalists, and sometimes for good reason. If you're not doing a good job, they will try to take over your company. They will try to replace you or the other founders or the management, and there are plenty of disaster stories. If things are going well, then they're pretty easy to deal with. The thing that I did in choosing investors is, in addition to them having expertise in a particular domain that was interesting, whether it's consumer marketing or the internet space or payments or financial services, before I would accept any money from these guys, I went out to dinner with them for 3 or 4 hours to get to know them as people. And by and large, we didn't talk about business. We would talk about, so where are you from? What do you enjoy doing? What do you do with your kids? And you get to know if they're a decent person or not. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And that's how you pick your investors. As far as early employees, that's really tough. So the first person I hired was a friend, although became a friend in the process of trying to recruit him. So I was sitting alone in a room. I was really lonely. And so I and another guy that I met who was starting another company, we started a young founders hike. So every 2 weeks we would go on a hike. People who like the outdoors and were also entrepreneurial would join us. And so it was a group of maybe 10 or 15 guys hiking in the woods. And there was one guy, Matt Snyder, who was starting 3 different companies at the time. He was being paid by an MBA student $1,000 to work on one of them. The other was one of the co-founders of YouTube, because it had just been sold. He was starting a company with. And so on one of these hikes, we were actually climbing a tree, and about 70 feet up, I convinced him that owning 40% in this other company was less valuable than owning 2% in Mint, because I went through the math of why that company would never make money. It eventually, 6 months later, went out of business. And then I said, all right, I know you're not convinced, but I've got a 2-bedroom apartment. You're living on a cot in Stanford, making $1,000 a month, living on rice. I will triple your salary, pay $3,000 a month out of my pocket. You can pay me $1,000 back in rent. It's sort of slavery. I have 2 cars. You can have the other one. And I think there's a girl you should meet. And he's still dating her 4 years later. So if you set up like every aspect of a person's life, then you can potentially get them as an employee. So that's how I did it. And in this process, I got to know him very well and much more trustworthy.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us. So the Wasabi CEO wrote a blog post reflecting on basically why he lost to Mint.
Yeah.
What did you think of his reflections? Did you agree, disagree?
So for those of you who don't know, we actually had a number of competitors who came out roughly the same time that Mint did. One of them, maybe the best financed of our competitors, was called Wesabe, W-E-S-A-B-E. And they actually came out 11 months ahead of us. They came out right after we had gotten funding. In fact, if they had launched just a month or 2 earlier, maybe we wouldn't have even gotten funding. And the CEO wrote about why they ultimately lost to Mint. And what he reflected on was Mint made it easier to get your data in. So you just type in your bank username and password. It sucks in all of your data every night, categorizes it up, checks it against your budget, sends you email reminders. They were so focused on security that they had like a little downloadable client initially where you would type in your credentials and they would never be stored in the cloud. And that was arguably more secure, but it was inconvenient. You had to download the app and get it configured and set up, and it only worked on Windows initially. And then their name was Wesabe. It's impossible when somebody says Wasabi to figure out what domain to go to. The first time I heard about them, it was verbally, and I typed W-A-S-A-B-I, you know, like the stuff you get with sushi. It took me over an hour to find them, and I was highly motivated because they were a competitor. You will lose all word of mouth marketing if you don't have a good name. Most people choose their name because the domain is available. That's a really bad idea. I spent 3 months and $182,000 negotiating for Mint.com, and it was the best purchase I ever made.
Hi, so I'm a numbers guy at heart, and I looked at your slides where you projected that Mint.com was potentially more valuable than Cooking. Now, is that true yet? And if so, and if not, how long do you think it will be before Mint.com could be making more money than Cooking?
As an officer of a publicly traded company, I am not allowed to comment on revenues and future projections. It's just one of those things. If it was a year ago, I'd tell you whatever you wanted to know.
Thanks, Aaron, for inspirational talk. So currently, engineering is targeting just individuals. So it's personal finance management system. Are you planning to target businesses?
About 5 to 10% of the people on Mint are small businesses and sole proprietors. We're not specifically planning on targeting businesses simply because Intuit has QuickBooks. I personally think QuickBooks could be better. Probably shouldn't say that in public. But if I have the opportunity to help them out with their designs, I may do that. The user interface, the initial setup, I think, would be important.
Yes. So when you began Mint and you're just a website, how do you convince a huge bank to connect to you when you're just one guy or two people?
Oh, you don't tell them. You either use the OFX standard, the Open Financial Exchange format. It's an XML standard that Microsoft Money and Quicken pioneered back in the late 90s. Or you use screen scraping, which means you write a script to essentially log in as the person, find the page with the transactions. Okay, this column is dates, this column is amounts, this column is descriptions. That's a dirtier way to do it. It can be error prone if they change their website too much. You can wildcard it so that it's can handle some changes, but largely you don't have to negotiate with every bank until you get to a certain size.
If you were starting a company today and you had a shoestring budget, how would you go about getting users?
Well, Mint had a shoestring budget in the beginning. The way we got our users initially is we started about 8 months before the product launched a personal finance blog. And so the personal finance blog, we couldn't really afford real writers, so we would write the articles ourselves. So we did a series called Trainwreck Tuesdays, like what are the financial mistakes that people have made, and users would write in and say, oh, I bought 5 houses and mortgaged myself this way, and everybody's like, ha ha ha, I only did that with 2 houses and not 5. It makes you feel better about yourself when somebody makes a much worse financial mistake. So that was one of the series that we did, that was very popular. We did a What's in Your Wallet series where all the employees would explain why they carried the credit cards and the brokerages that they did. And so once we established that beachhead, we got other personal finance bloggers to write articles for us for free, so long as we'd link back to their site. And so at the bottom of all the pages on the blog, we had a little Mint is an awesome financial management application coming soon. Send your email for more information. Before we launched, we collected about 25,000, 30,000 emails just off of our blog, which, by the way, we had more traffic to our blog than our competitors who had launched 11 months before us. And then we decided, well, 20,000 is actually more than we can handle. We could only handle a couple hundred people because the system was pretty flaky in the beginning. And so we said, all right, 20,000 users. Anybody who puts up a badge that says, I want Mint, on their own blog or their MySpace page or Facebook or whatever it may be, we'll give you priority treatment. We'll let you into the alpha version or the pre-alpha version. And so we had 600 people do that. They basically put up free banner ads in 600 different places, which means that not only you have a free banner ad, but you have 600 incoming links. And the more links that you have to your site, the higher your Google page rank, which means that you start ranking well for every keyword that you have. And so it was a content strategy that we did that was essentially for free. And that's how we did our initial marketing. Mint has spent less than $1 per user in acquisition. A lot of it is just press. Press is the best way that we've discovered to acquire users. So I spend about 1 week out of every 2 months doing a press tour. It's pain, but it gets us millions of users.
Okay, so we'll take 2 more questions, one back there and then Vivek.
First, I have a few things I want to say. My name is Ken D'Amato. I'm a local business person. First, I want to congratulate you. I've been following your company for about 2 years.
Thank you.
You were part of the inspiration for me starting this business, which at some point in time we're going to be talking to your company because we want to plug into Mint. But
Okay.
based on what you have done with the company, it's a clean business. It's very simple. Even though I'm not an engineer and I've been a marketing guy and a business guy most of my career, and I do agree with you on the fact of the value of an engineer versus people like me within the business model. But I actually have raised money by our financial model being modeled to Mint in terms of your acquisition. I can tell you that your month-to-month growth, and I know everything about it, and we've raised $1.8 million in the last 7 months.
Awesome.
In the startup without any VC, and we're in the process of closing out Series A. And if it wasn't for your success and how you sold the business in September of 2009, I'm actually talking with a local investor who knows you personally, that is probably going to wind up investing in the company as well. I'll tell you that we have several people using your site, and I can actually think do a better job answering it than you may because you're an officer of the company, but there is no question that Mint, the reason why Intuit bought them is because there is more value in Mint than there is in their own company. And what
Well, not their own company, but
in terms of the Quicken piece.
Yeah.
Because, basically they outdid, Mint outdid Quicken in a period of time where they had to acquire them. Because the third thing I wanted to bring to after I thanked you and let you know that you've actually helped me with our business is the Yodlee piece.
Yep.
Because the connection with the bank is critical, and we know that Yodlee has connections with over 10,000 financial institutions, and now you guys are forging ahead now that I guess you're even more well-financed and have turned on over 3,500 relationships with banks in the last 6-7 months.
Yeah, so we have about 18,000 banks and credit unions that'll be online by the end of the year.
Okay, so the numbers that we have are still a little old. But the question is, how did you actually forge that relationship with Yodlee? And was there ever a chance that they, because you had such a better mousetrap than Quicken, were interested in buying you or putting an investment into the company?
Yeah. So this is, maybe we should answer this one offline. One of the ways that Mint connected up to all the banks is we didn't have to do the work of connecting up to each individual bank. There was an intermediary, a company called Yodlee. There's another one called Cash Edge that will link up to about 8,000 banks each. And so they have 60 script engineers in India who will figure out how to connect up to each and every bank. And so we use them for the first part of Mint to get started, and now we're on our own aggregation platform as of late. Actually, we still have a small portion of people who have Yodlee accounts, but that'll be over in January.
Okay, so we'll just do one last question, then we'll break for reception, and you'll have an opportunity to chat with Aaron again. So one last question. Okay.
I'm a user whose life you have transformed.
Thank you.
After 49 years of marriage and no budget, we finally have a budget. My question is, however, I do hope you're going to clean up the printing aspect of it. And my other question is, do you read those blogs of frustrated users who have these problems? Or does it keep you awake at night? Or how do you deal with the user aggravation problem? But anyway, thank you for your application.
You're welcome. Yeah, so one of the big principles that we have in our design is we put all of our new feature designs in front of actual real users. So we'll take anywhere from 5 to 15 people of all ages and demographics and backgrounds and put it in front of any new feature to see how they like it, how they use it, what works and what doesn't. We also have a pretty extensive forums and customer feedback system, and we try to prioritize the new features that we add based on just the number of people who request them. And so things like we've added custom categories, manual transactions, certain aspects of budgeting directly based on our customer feedback. I've heard printing before. It's not in the top 5 that I know of, but it's something that we've talked about because it really helps when working with a financial advisor or accountant, or when it comes to tax time, to be able to print off any page on Mint. But anybody who has feedback can send it to me, or questions. It's aaron@mint.com.
Hey, so I'd like to thank Aaron for this
Thank you.
great talk, not just because it had binding decision diagrams, amazed that he managed to pull into it, but also because of his the way he managed to connect the entire class through Princeton, in fact, through when he was 6 years old, all the way to answering the questions that I'm sure a lot of you who are thinking about your own businesses, most students and others here, had and he addressed them. So, as I said, Aaron's going to be around. We have reception, small reception here, so please hang around and chat with him. Thank you.
Princeton University's Keller Center, educating leaders for a technology-driven society.